service is just different. Used to be please and thank you, but that's just the basis. You know that for running a business. If you don't do those things, then you can't play. And it won't matter how much candy you give out or how nice you are to the customer if you don't show up on time or get their order done on time and doesn't have these blatant mistakes in it. So one of the reasons I wrote the book really had to do with growing up with my dad. My father was a builder or a remodeler, whatever you chose to call him in those days, which was in the 50s. And he used to do these really amazing things. I didn't know they were amazing then, but now I know they were really amazing. And I missed going to first grade by a few months. I don't know how many of you read the book Outliers, but they talk about, you know, what happens in your life based on when you were born, the time you were born in, and even that little part about when you got to school. Well, I was too young to go to kindergarten, and my mother wanted me out of the house. So she said to my dad, take her. And this is the way she described it to me. I don't really remember this, but she said, you know, I just needed you out of there because all you wanted to do all day long was say, read to me. And so she said, I read as much as I could, and then I needed to get you out of the house so I could do something else. So I went with my dad, and my dad would be on the construction site, and all my uncles worked for him. And so it was always a question of what my uncles were doing. And, you know, some days they were good, and some days they were not good. And one day my dad said to me, if you broke a lamp in a customer's house, what would you do, Liz? And I said, I'd fix it. Good answer, he said. The next thing he said to me, well, if you couldn't fix the lamp, what would you do then? I said, well, I'd buy him a new one. He said, that's a good answer too. So, you know, I grew up sort of thinking that whatever you broke, you fixed. Whatever, if you couldn't fix it, you bought a new one. And people were always at our house. My father had a saying, maybe now it would be his mission statement, that once Tony's customer, always Tony's customer. You came for lunch, you came for dinner, you came for tea hour on Friday at 5 in the afternoon, which did not involve tea. As my dad got older, he went to Florida. He wanted a house in Florida. That was his dream, and in his 50s he became very, very ill. He bought a home in Florida, and he and my mother used to go to Florida, and they would take all the customers with them. So it was like everybody bought a house in Florida to be next door to Tony. And it was like that until my father died, and he was like 85 years old. And so I thought about that. The customers lived with us. There were kids who would spend the summers with us. They were my dad's customers' kids. And I thought about that, and when I went into my own business, you know, I realized what you had to do in order to keep customers. But I got a lot of that from my dad. And as I looked back at that and thought about it, I said, you know, it's really changing. Because if you go out, how many of you have had really lousy customer service? You go to a restaurant, right? And you say, that was the worst sauce I ever had. And I'm not coming back here again, and I'm going to write him a letter, and I'm going to do this. And you go home, and what do? Nothing. You go to bed, and you wake up the next morning, and you say, okay, that's over. I just won't go there. How many people do you tell? As many people as will listen. By the way, okay, so in terms of customer service, here are some of the statistics that are really critical for your business. 96% of consumers never complain. They just go away mad. Which means you've got customers out there that are bad-mouthing you that you know nothing about. Well, these days you might know something about them because they wrote a little note on City Search, right? Or they went to Angie's List and complained. I have to tell you about my painter. There was a really nice guy who painted. I live downtown, Hamilton Street, and he must have painted 8 houses in a row this year. He was really nice. He was good. He was fast. His prices were terrific, and he was really reasonable. And I know that because the first 3 colors we put on my house, I hated. Absolutely. I stood out there, and I watched him up on the lift, and I said, I'm going to cry. This looks so awful. And I'm like waving, hey, Jim, come down. Can we talk about this? He came down. He said, what's the matter? I said, it looks just terrible. And he goes, you know, I was thinking that too. And I said, you were? He said, yeah, the sunlight looks awful. Really reasonable guy. And, you know, it sort of got to be the talk of the neighborhood. We changed the colors, and then we changed another color, and I thought, for sure, you know, I'll never see him again. He was just so nice. I went on City Search at the end. I was going to write a note about him. There was the worst comment out there that I've ever seen. If that's the same Jim that lives in so-and-so, and he's the kid of such and such, that's such an awful family, I thought to myself, wait, oh my goodness, what could this be about? He had no idea And I didn't even know what it was, but I just thought to myself, there it is, it's so blatant. And he did really everything right. And so I'm thinking to myself, even if you do everything right these days, it will show up somewhere. So if somewhere in your past you've done something, there's a good possibility that it'll be out there. So as I always say, just be real cautious about what you put out there. And if you want to have a Halloween party and get drunk and take off your clothes, I suggest you don't do it. Because it will be out there, and then one day you'll have to, stand up for that and whatever. So, again, 85% of consumers Google before they ever come and find you. So what are they finding out about you? Because that's the thing you want to monitor when it comes to your customer service. So you go out and you take a look, and you find out what people are saying. Now, your statement about we're either going to get new customers or get the old customers, we're going to strangle them and bring them in. The best source of new customers is your old customers. So that's an important thing in customer service for you to understand. That by the time your business is 5 years old, how old is Pine House, by the way? How old is it?
27 years.
I know I've heard lots about them.
27 years.
27 years, which means you have a huge customer base out there, right? So by the time a business is 5 years old, 80% of your new business will come from past customers. So the real key to customer service is what are you doing to keep the customers that really love you? What kind of connections do you have with them? Because everything out there that we read and everything that I research says that people want connections. We're desperate for connections. So the rise of Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of ways that we connect with. I read something very interesting. They said if Facebook was a country, it would be the third largest in the world. So if you think about the size of that, and the fastest growing demographic is 60 and over, just so you know. So what's happened to our customer? Let's just go back for a minute. What happened to our customer? And how did we get to the part where you're all saying, I don't have as many, or I see other areas that don't have as many, and I wonder if that'll happen to us? People say, it's the economy, stupid. Well, it's not exactly all about the economy, and that's what I think is really critical for us to look at. Our main customer is the baby boomer, or has been for most businesses. The baby boomer is somewhere close to 60 at this point, and they are the ones that have had the most difficult times in the last 2 years. So your customer with all the money has been the one that's been ravaged. This is the one that maybe lost some of their retirement money. Their 401k is a 101k at this point. This is the customer that said, my house, I want to sell my house and I really can't sell my house. So this is your customer, the baby boomer. They're the ones that took the hit. And it may be you, as a matter of fact, and myself. If you think about that, so they're part of what's happened in the economy. So we have that to deal with. That customer is frightened. That customer is now reevaluating their lives. In our industry, which is floor covering and kitchens, how many kitchens can you have? Well, people would put in a kitchen, not because they needed one, but they had expendable dollars, and they did. So we've had two types of customers that have been fueling our economy for the last 5 or 6 years. They're what we call the customer with money, and then we have what we call the aspirational customer. This is the customer who had good credit card, and just spent like there was no tomorrow, and never thought the party would end. Never thought the banks would crash, never thought what would happen in the insurance industry, never thought what would happen to General Motors. So they just spent and spent. Well, that customer's out of the market. So think about that. The aspirational customer is scared to death at this point. Credit card bills, all kinds of debt. The other customer, which was your baby boomer, is not so much in the market anymore because of what happened to them. So that's kind of the economy thing. But let me tell you what else happened. While those years were going on, the last 4 or 5 years, while things were changing, there were other things going on.